versus nurture is always an interesting one. Okay, natural ability. What else?
What will I be able to do?
Go on, I think talent is a measure of relativity to your peer group. So if you're a talent, you're in some way a measure over and above everyone else who does it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not talking about comparing a 7-year-old with a 27-year-old. Absolutely. It's, are you better than the other 7-year-olds around you, if that's your peer group?
I don't know what that number is though, whether it's better than 80% of the people, 70%. It's something, isn't it?
Yeah, a top percentage. Yeah, good. So a natural ability, yeah, and a benchmarking type thing. Anything else?
We tried to be open-minded and said that actually everyone has a talent.
Okay, so everyone has a talent, right?
Whether, depending what the individual is looking for.
Okay. So what separates one person from the next? Because if
Opinion.
opinion, right? But I reckon if we put a basketball ring up there, everybody in here could get a ball and start shooting it at the basketball ring. Do you agree?
Yeah.
So what's going to separate us?
Those who can do it and those who can't.
So there's a bit of success, yeah, and a measure, yeah, which might be what? Could be success. What else? Yeah, often needs, yeah.
Technique.
We might start to look at some technical. We might look at consistency. Yeah.
Drive of the individual.
So what's that
Passion, the drive or the passion they put into it.
Okay, so there's some motivation elements.
Improvement.
Good.
Improvement, do they improve?
Yeah, add some progression elements. Good. So then what is potential? What's the difference?
They do what they are getting better. They are whatever the measurement is.
Okay.
Growth.
So some scope for growth. Well, actually, so interesting. So my job title is talent identification manager. That actually is probably more about potential, because when I'm working with England under-15s at the end of the month, I'm interested in whether they have the ability to go and play in the seniors in 10 years' time, or 5 years' time, some of them. But not necessarily the talent part. So there's a couple of definitions for you there. So yeah, so we are talking about doing a task that puts you in that top percent, like we kind of talked about there, relative to other people in your peer group. So it isn't about comparing that 7-year-old with what a 27-year-old can do. Absolutely, it's about that peer group. But we're looking at the potential part, is those latent qualities. What could they do? What could they become? And certainly when you're working with kids, that's the bit that we're interested in. It's where can we get them to in terms of their potential long term. Now, in terms of just making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of the definitions, this is talent identification. It is about recognising the players that could go on and play at a more advanced level. Now, in terms of our player pathway, that could be a grassroots kid, any age, going on to go to a professional club, whether that's a satellite centre or a pre-academy group or a development group. They all name them slightly different. Before they might sign at the academy, and then the next step from the academy pathway will be into international football. So that is the level, kind of the pathway through that we're looking at in terms of playing at a more advanced level. Individual clubs will have their own pathway internally. Can we get kids in to our pre-academy, into the academy, into the first team? That might be relative to what they're looking for. And then talent development is the bit when the kids are in the system and the coaches do the work with them. And that is where the progression and continuity and learning and development stuff happens as the kids move forward. So that's the talent development part, just in terms of the two. And we'll kind of go across and discuss both parts today. But just in terms of some of the research that's out there around talent, some of it's been done with an elite athlete on a treadmill in a lab with a VO2 max mask over their face in a totally sterile environment that looks nothing like December on a muddy pitch in Maidstone with sideways rain. It's very different. And to say that if we do this here, we're going to get this, again, is a really dangerous assumption to make, because they might be very, very different. I was at a Premier League club in the north with all their scouts in the room, and one of the guys said, just had a kid signed in the academy here because he reminded me of Alan Smith as a kid. This was the Yorkshire Man United Alan Smith. But when you think about that as a statement, it doesn't actually make any sense at all. So he might play a little bit like him, but he's got different genetics and DNA, different parents, different family, different teachers, different coaches, growing up at a different time when the game is different. He's got different mates that he plays with in a different place and all sorts of games. But he's narrowed it down to one factor, that was the reason that the kid got signed. And this was a 10-year-old kid. But this is the important part that we've got to do, is actually it's taking in that breadth of different information, not just narrowing it down to one thing. Because it isn't, it's a complex process. I don't think it's complicated, but it's complex. It's like a perfect storm. It's so many different factors that have to come together in order to produce a high-performance athlete. And again, we'll kind of break down some of those as we go through tonight. Now, again, there's lots of books and lots of research out there. Some of you might have come across these books. Anyone seen Matthew Side Bounce? Anybody read that? Yeah, a few of you. Malcolm Gladwell, a popular one that's also out there. Now, what I would say is when you read these kind of things, is read them with a critical lens. So, Matthew on the right there, I like Matthew, he's a nice guy. He's a journalist. He's got a book to sell. Now, to write a book, you have to write quite a nice story. And what he's decided to do within this is ignore a load of evidence that counters his own story, because that won't make such a nice book. And there's a danger if we leave education to journalists, because they have their own slant and view on the world. So pretty much the message that comes through from Bounce is, with enough hard work, anyone can become a champion. It is simply nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Because I bet everybody in this room did pretty much the same as me as a kid. You played football before school, at break time, at lunchtime, after school, every weekend, out on the park with your mates, in the garden. I bet we all played loads of football. So why haven't we all played in the Premier League? Because it isn't simply just about hard work. The guy on the left here, Malcolm Gladwell, he took a piece of research and used it in a chapter in his book, which was called the 10,000 hour rule. Anybody come across the 10,000 hours thing? Right. Again, 10,000 hours rule. It is simply nonsense. It is BS. I've never been on a pitch with a kid when at the start of that day they'd done 9,999, and by the time Mum picked them up, they were a Premier League footballer. That doesn't happen. Yet I know a mum who's got a graph on the fridge and she ticks off every hour that her son does at the academy because she's read that book. Now, I don't know what she thinks is going to happen when he gets to 10,000, but Mikey isn't going to be in the Premier League. And what he's done is taken a piece of research incredibly literally. The piece of research was done by a guy called Anders Ericsson. And Anders works at Florida State University, and his research was with violinists and pianists at the Berlin School of Music. Now again, you can't say developing high performance on a finger manipulative task with no decision making, individual, is exactly the same as what goes on in football. Where we have a complex, dynamic, moving game with lots of pieces and lots of relationships. You can't just say one's going to mean the other. And equally, in the research that Ericsson did, what he presented was the average amount of time. He didn't show the variables. So what he did was the best experts became the best in 10,000 hours. That's the average. But what he didn't do was show the variable in terms of the spread of data. So he didn't show you the people that have become best experts that have done 3,000 hours. Or the people that have done 25,000 hours and still aren't experts. Because he tried to package it all up in something neat that this guy has then termed the 10,000 hour rule. So again, it's simply nonsense. Piece of research from Germany last year, Bundesliga players making their debut 4,200 hours of practice. International German players, 4,500 hours. That's nowhere near this magical 10,000 hours nonsense that's out there. There's loads of stuff in Olympic wrestling, in hockey, lots of different sports where people have done it in 3, 4, 5,000 hours. There's some stuff in talent transfer now where they're taking Olympic sprinters and putting them onto the the T-tray thing that you slide down a bobsleigh track on at the Winter Games. You've got to be a lunatic to do that. Skeleton bob or whatever it's called. 800 hours. Because if you can run really fast, and there aren't many people doing it in the world, you've probably got a chance of being quite good at it. So again, the sports change differently. We did a lot in this country, in UK sport, around talent transfer, looking at 2 programs. One was a Giants program on the back of, or previous to the Olympics, and one was a talent transfer program. Rebecca Romero went from rowing to cycling, wins Olympic medals in both sports. Because it's not technical as such, but if you've got a massive VO2 max in terms of your lung capacity, you'll probably be quite good. But again, football's very different. You can't just say, because it works in bobsleigh, it's going to work here. So, with all these kind of things, be cautious with some of this research. The best book out there is a guy called David Epstein, who's written a book called The Sports Gene. And what he's done, he's an academic scientist guy, works in sport, he's just gone, here's all the evidence, you make your mind up yourself. Which is probably the best way to do it, as opposed to Matthew, who's got his own table tennis view of the world because he grew up in a certain street. So just be cautious with some of those kind of bits and pieces. So what we then do is we position all of this in this structure, and we do this at international level, and the professional clubs will do this in their own way as well. So through the England youth teams, we have the England DNA, and I'm sure Simon has got a programme, or if he's not, we've been doing sessions around the county looking at what does the England DNA look like in terms of in possession, out possession, set pieces, transition, the football type parts. That extends to how we support the players and what the future player looks like. And all of this information is on the England DNA website. This is coming through the youth teams. I would argue what you saw in the Euros in the summer with Roy is not the England DNA. Roy came in a couple of years before the DNA was launched, very much his own man. I think what you will get now, because I've certainly seen it through the 21s now, with Gareth, depending on how long he stays in the role, is you will start to see a lot more of this. And he's talked about it already. Playing with freedom, players being brave in possession. These are the kind of things that it looks like. So once you know how you want to play, out of this then drives the type of player that you want to deliver that philosophy. And I'll give you an example. 2014 World Cup. John Terry, still probably one of our better centre-halves in the English game. Doesn't get picked. And everyone in the media, well, he's our best centre-half, blah, blah, blah. But we want to play in a certain way. The way that John Terry plays at Chelsea is deep. The other left back is very close to him, and there's no gaps for people to play through. Roy, and I don't think Gareth will change, fullbacks high up the pitch. Out of possession, press early, win the ball back. If you do that with John Terry and your fullback suddenly 40 yards up the pitch, you've now got a massive hole, and he ain't the quickest, that the opposition will exploit. So tactically, it didn't fit with how we wanted to play. So your playing philosophy will drive the characteristic of the player that you want to deliver it, and then where we look in terms of our talent value. And professional clubs will be exactly the same. Now, I would suggest that for you guys in here as grassroots clubs, the questions you need to think about is, well, what does this mean to me? I would argue that pretty much most grassroots clubs in this country are not clubs. I think they are a collection of teams playing running under the same name with the same kit. Because the way the under 8 manager works is totally different to the way the under 12 manager works. And is totally different to how the under 16 manager works. And there's no link at all with the first team if they call one. But we call you a club. So the questions are we going back to the chairman, the secretary, the committee, whoever runs the club and saying, right, what do we stand for? What is our playing philosophy at this club? And there's a great club down in Dorset, Hampshire, way called Longfleet that have done exactly this. It's all online on their website. You can pull it all off there. It's a massive document that talks about what the club stands for in terms of their values, match day philosophy, coaching philosophy, everything in terms of rotation of players around positions, age-appropriate practices for different 5v5, 7v7, all the way through to them below. And that's one club. And how they play at under 8s is exactly the same all the way through to their first team, except there's a few more players on the pitch. So it is possible, but I would certainly be going back and say, well, what does that look like? Because having worked in the grassroots club for quite a long time, by the time I got to under 14s, I didn't have a clue who the under 7s manager was. Probably never saw him. But we call ourselves a club. So it might be kind of some of those questions that you start to consider. Now, you'll all be very familiar with this as coaches, particularly from a scouting perspective. What we tend to find are scouts are comfortable with this stuff. They're happy with the bits that you can see. But the defining factors long term in high performance sport are on the right hand side of the wall. I'm sure some of you will be similar to me. I can think of players and kids that I grew up with that might have been really good here, but if there's nothing between the ears, they disappear off and fall out of the system. So the challenge is, how do we start to recognise those factors and what they look like? So, technical things, nothing on there that wouldn't surprise you in terms of the kind of things that you might look for at different age groups, etc. But the important part to understand then is, well, what's your expectation of a 7-year-old doing that, or a 14-year-old doing that? But how do all 4 corners influence what goes on? So you might be looking at a 7 or 8-year-old kid and looking at their range of passing, but that 7-year-old kid will have a huge influence on their range of passing from other things. So I might see Ben on the other side of the pitch as the right person for me to pass to, but if I don't trust him, I'm not giving it to him. Which I probably don't have. But he might be over there, and I might trust him, but if I can't kick it that far, I'm not going to do it either. So you've got an impact from the social corner, and an impact from the physical corner on the decision making of a kid. And all of a sudden, that kid gets caught in possession, and you go, range of passing is no good. Because you can see that pass all right over there, but you don't get the influencing factors in the same way. So it's about recognising how they all kind of start to play a role as well. Physical corner, again, things that wouldn't surprise you. Of course, the key thing is then recognising what this looks like through the age groups. So, controlled use of limbs for a 7-8-year-old kid that's got limited fundamental movement skills, but then compare that with a 14-15-year-old boy that's going through growth and maturation, that all of a sudden has exactly the same issues. I know a kid who was at a professional club, massive drop, teenager, massive drop in his technical ability, literally couldn't control the ball. Range of pass was all over the place, literally fell away. Socially, teammates started getting at him, hugely. Psychologically, massive drop in self-confidence, huge drop of self-worth in amongst the rest of the peer group, all because he'd grown an inch in a week. Now that's scary, but that can happen. And the negative effect of everything else has a huge role just because one of these things has happened. So, You can pick one kid for your club. Who are you picking? The one with the hand on the ball, which is bigger than his head. Yeah. So there's Lionel Messi. Grassroots football. Where would this kid have played? Centre back. Why would you put him centre back?
Big bloke.
Big bloke, kick the furthest. Good. We're more comfortable the further the ball is away from our own goal. Absolutely. Where'd you put your fastest kid? On the wing or up front. Why'd you put him up there? Because he's quick and you hope he's faster than their biggest kid. That is grassroots football. I've done it. I've been there. But you've literally got no idea what's going to happen on that pathway as they go up. Skinny left back at Southampton. At 13, when he was 16, he gets a scholarship by one vote. Because the head of recruitment, who'd been there a long time, really voted for him. A guy called Rob Ruddock. Goes to Tottenham. He holds the record at Tottenham and in the Premier League for the most continuous amount of games without winning. Interesting record to have. And then all of a sudden he's a machine. But if you got rid of him there because he didn't have impact on the game and couldn't get about the pitch, you then miss this in the long term. Yet I've sat for many years in meetings at professional clubs where the coaches would say, we're releasing him at the end of the season. Why? Because he doesn't impact the game. He doesn't get about the pitch. And I'm saying, he's 12 and you've stuck him on a full-size pitch. This isn't a cross-country championship. Because the coach's ego gets in the way. And because that player's not helping them win a match, which makes them look brilliant, all of a sudden the kid's no good. But we have to think long-term in terms of this pathway. Stuff from the site corner. Now currently we use this 5 C's model. Obviously control is the additional C there, which has come from a piece of research from Loughborough University. I've added in creativity because I think this is an important area as well. Creativity is one that we'll touch upon later on, actually, rather than go into it now. So, these are all the kind of things that we might see. When we go out to watch the kids, this is what we're going to be looking at. These are the bits we've got to focus on. This is a piece of research done with high-performance athletes and Olympians. Anya McNamara at the University in the North. If you're going to go all the way to the top as an elite athlete, this is the stuff you have to have. If you cannot cope with pressure, you won't be really happy. That will then be a differentiator between the best at elite level and the very, very best. So the question is, what does this look like and how do we develop this in our practice